The Time Machine Summary. H.G. Wells's Time Travel Warning about Class, Comfort, and Collapse.
H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, published in 1895, is one of the founding texts of modern science fiction. And this The Time Machine summary is built for readers who want the plot to feel clean, vivid, and causally connected, not like a blur of then this happened fragments. The premise is famous. A Victorian inventor claims he has built a machine that can move through time. What makes the story last is what he finds when he tests it. Wells turns time travel into a trapdoor under the era's confidence. The farther forward the time traveller goes, the more the future feels like an argument about the present, about inequality, about who does the work, about how comfort reshapes the human animal. The central tension is not will time travel work? It is what does humanity become when progress is mistaken for safety? Wells keeps tightening that question until the future stops being a playground and becomes a verdict. The story turns on whether the time traveller can face what humanity becomes and still find a way back. Key points. This The Time Machine summary highlights the core premise and stakes without revealing the ending. The Time Machine follows a Victorian inventor who claims to have built a device that can travel through time, and then returns in shock to describe what he saw. The time traveller journeys to a distant future and finds humanity split into two radically different descendants, the gentle Eloi above ground and the subterranean Morlocks below. What looks like paradise at first becomes a horror story about dependency, predation, and hidden systems that keep comfort alive. The plot's engine is practical and urgent. The time traveller's machine disappears, and he must recover it to avoid being stranded. Wells uses the future as social X-ray, suggesting that class division can harden over centuries into biology, culture, and fate. The story's most unsettling move is scale. It does not stop at one future society, but pushes toward the far end of Earth's life. The emotional heartbeat is brief but sharp. The time traveller's bond with Weena, an Eloi he rescues, becomes a test of empathy in a world shaped by fear. Full plot. From this point onward, the article discusses the full storyline and the final outcomes. Act 1. Setup and inciting incident. The story opens with the narrator, a dinner guest who wants a rational explanation for a friend's strange claims, describing a regular gathering at the home of the time traveller, a Victorian inventor who wants to prove an idea that sounds impossible. The mood is half social, half scientific. Conversation drifts toward big questions, and the time traveller pushes one in particular. Time is not just something people live inside, but a dimension that might be navigated. The time traveller argues that ordinary experience traps people into thinking the present is fixed. People move through time the way a train moves through countryside, always forward, always at the same speed, never stepping off the track. The difference, he suggests, is that a mind with the right tool might change the speed and direction. The guests react like intelligent skeptics do. Some are amused, some are interested, but unconvinced. Philby, an argumentative friend who wants proof, not philosophy, presses him hard. The time traveller responds by showing a small model of his invention. He activates it in front of them. The miniature device abruptly vanishes. The room fills with the kind of silence that follows a trick you cannot explain. Some guests assume it is sleight of hand, others suspect a hidden mechanism. The time traveller treats their doubt as predictable, even necessary. He is not asking for belief. He is setting up the terms of a demonstration. He takes the guests to his laboratory and shows them the full-sized time machine, a strange chair-like contraption built to be mounted and controlled. It is not presented as magic. It is presented as engineering. The time traveller's invitation is simple. Come back, and he will prove the claim with his own body. When the guests return for the next gathering, the time traveller is late. That lateness becomes the first real pressure point because it implies either failure or danger. When he finally arrives, he looks wrecked, dirty, injured, exhausted, and ravenous. He eats like someone coming back from a long chase, not from an evening stroll. The guests push for answers. The time traveler begins his account. He describes entering his laboratory, mounting the machine, and activating it. At first, the effect is not a cinematic portal, it is acceleration. The world blurs into motion. Day and night flicker like a strobe. The sun arcs across the sky in fast loops. People and vehicles become streaks. The room itself changes around him. He watches structures shift and replace each other as years and decades stampede past. The time traveler stops briefly at several points, then pushes onward, testing the device's control. He realizes that stopping is as risky as traveling, because he is now an intruder into whatever era he lands in. He keeps going until the world outside his machine becomes unfamiliar in a deeper way, not just new fashions or different buildings, but altered landscape and mood. He brings the machine to rest in the year 800 2701. He steps out into a future that initially looks like a pastoral dream built on the ruins of a grander civilization. The air feels clean, the vegetation is abundant. Giant, decaying structures suggest past brilliance, but no current industry. The most striking feature is a large, unnatural monument near where he arrives. A white sphinx-like statue that functions as a landmark and, later, as a locked door. The time traveler is quickly approached by small, beautiful, childlike humanoids. The Eloi, a soft communal people who want immediate pleasure and safety. Their demeanor is gentle but shallow. They are curious for a moment, then easily distracted. They do not show the disciplined attention the time traveler expects from advanced humans. They laugh, they play, they eat fruit, they avoid darkness. The time traveler tries to ask questions and establish shared language. Progress is slow. The Eloi's lack of focus frustrates him because it complicates his main problem. The time machine is his only way home, and he needs to secure it. That problem hits with sudden force. When he returns to the area near the White Sphinx, the time machine is gone. Panic is immediate and rational. Without the machine, the time traveler is stranded in a future he does not understand, with people who cannot help him. He searches, interrogates, and tries to force the Eloi into coordinated action. They respond with vague attention and then drift away, as if urgency itself is an emotion they no longer possess. The time traveler's first working hypothesis is theft. He begins scanning the environment for structures that could conceal the machine. The White Sphinx, with its unnatural presence, starts to look less like a statue and more like a sealed container. But it appears locked, and there is no obvious mechanism to open it. The next key shift comes through geography. The landscape is dotted with deep wells, vertical shafts that descend into darkness. The Eloi avoid them. That avoidance, plus the well's unnatural uniformity, suggests infrastructure. The time traveler's mind moves where Wells wants it to move. Paradise is not natural. Someone built it, and someone maintains it. At night, the time traveler sees fleeting movement that does not match the Eloi. Pale shapes, quick, low motion, a sense of being watched. The Eloi's fear of darkness intensifies. They huddle together as if nighttime is not merely the absence of daylight, but the arrival of something predatory. The time traveler connects this fear to the wells. He decides to investigate. He lowers himself into one of the shafts and discovers the existence of the Morlocks, subterranean dwellers who want food and control. The Morlocks are adapted to darkness and machinery. Their underground world contains industrial remnants, devices that suggest the true labor of this paradise happens below. Above ground, the Eloi live in comfort without understanding how the system works. Below ground, the Morlocks keep the machinery alive and treat the Eloi as livestock. The time traveler's theory forms quickly because Wells wants the reader to feel the click. He interprets the Eloi and Morlocks as evolutionary outcomes of class division, a leisure class softened into helplessness, and a working class driven underground into toughness, technical skill, and eventually resentment that turns into predation. This is no longer just a lost machine adventure, it is a social horror story. In the middle of this, Wells threads in a small human line that makes the moral stakes personal. The time traveler rescues an Eloi named Weena, a gentle individual who wants safety and attachment, when she falls into a river and begins to drown. The other Eloi do not help her. They watch with passive curiosity, as if empathy has been bred out of them. The rescue changes Weena's behavior toward the time traveler. She follows him. She treats him as protector, novelty, and companion. For the time traveler, Weena becomes evidence that tenderness can still exist in the future, even if the larger society is degraded. Their bond is also practical. She gives him an anchor in a world where social cohesion has collapsed into shallow group behavior. The time traveler now pursues a plan with clear steps: recover the time machine, avoid Morlocks, and escape the Eloi Morlock ecosystem before he becomes prey. What changes here is that the time traveler stops treating the future as a curiosity and starts treating it as a trap. Act 2. Escalation and midpoint shift. The time traveler's plan runs into a brutal constraint. He cannot fight the Morlocks on their terms. In darkness, underground, he is disadvantaged. He needs light. He needs fire. He needs tools. And he needs to move through the landscape without being swallowed by night. He also realizes a psychological problem. The Eloi cannot be organized. They fear darkness, but fear does not translate into coordinated defense. They are like a population that has never needed strategy because strategy was outsourced to systems they no longer understand. Weena follows the time traveler as he explores. He tries to learn more language and more context, but the Eloi's mental world is thin. They do not preserve history, they do not read, they do not seem to build. They consume fruit and drift through the remains of past greatness as if ruins are simply scenery. The time traveler's suspicion about the White Sphinx grows. He returns to it repeatedly, searching for seams or levers. He becomes convinced the Morlocks have taken the machine and locked it inside as leverage. That belief is supported by the Morlocks' behavior. They watch him, test him, and appear to respond to his movements as if managing a captive. To break this stalemate, the time traveler decides to travel to a distant structure he has seen on the horizon, the Palace of Green Porcelain, a ruined museum-like building that offers tools from an older world. He brings Weena with him, partly from attachment, and partly because leaving her behind feels like abandoning the one person who treats him like more than an odd animal. The journey is physically taxing. Wells emphasizes fatigue because it increases vulnerability. The landscape is beautiful but deceptive. Distance is real, nightfall is real, and the Morlocks are real. At the palace, the time traveler finds what he needs: remnants of the old world's knowledge and materials. The building is a broken archive. Exhibits of science, industry, and natural history are decayed and dust-covered. Books crumble. The past is not preserved, it is rotting. But the time traveler salvages practical items. He finds matches, a controlled, portable way to make light and fire. He also finds camphor, a substance that can burn and help him create a stronger flame. He fashions a crude weapon from what he can carry because he knows he will have to fight his way back to the Sphinx and potentially into whatever chamber holds the machine. This moment is the story's midpoint shift because it reframes his situation from helpless to contested. Before, he was a stranded observer. Now he is a hunted animal that has found claws. He begins the return journey toward the Sphinx with Weena beside him. The goal is direct. Reach the statue before the Morlocks can isolate him in darkness, then use light and fire to force access to the chamber. Pressure escalates as the sun falls. The Morlocks begin to close in more boldly. Wells turns darkness into an antagonist. When the moon is absent or the night is especially black, the time traveler's fear spikes because he understands that the Morlock's environment is not just underground, it is night itself. The time traveler lights fires to keep the Morlocks back. Fire works, but it also creates new risks. It can spread, it can draw attention, it can become uncontrollable. Wells uses this as both suspense mechanism and symbolic tool. The technology that protects you can also destroy what you are trying to save. In a forested area, the time traveler and Weena are attacked. The Morlocks are not just lurking now, they are swarming. Weena collapses in fear and exhaustion. The time traveler fights his way through with fire as deterrent, but the situation becomes chaotic. A small fire becomes a larger one. The forest begins to burn. In the confusion and terror, the time traveler loses Weena. The details are not sentimental. Wells makes it bleak. The time traveler searches, calls, and tries to carry her, but the Morlocks and the fire and the darkness create a brutal arithmetic. He escapes the immediate threat, but Weena does not come with him. The loss is emotional and strategic. Emotionally, Weena was his one point of tenderness in the future. Strategically, her presence kept him tied to empathy, which is the story's moral pressure. Without her, he is more alone, more desperate, and more willing to treat the future as hostile terrain rather than a society to understand. The time traveler reaches the area near the Sphinx again, battered and furious. He is no longer curious, he is hunting his machine. What changes here is that survival replaces exploration as the time traveler's only priority. Act 3. Climax and Resolution. The endgame begins with one core constraint. The time traveler must retrieve the machine from the Morlock's control, and he must do it in a place designed to capture him. He returns to the White Sphinx and finds a decisive change. The sealed portion opens. The statue's hidden doors are now accessible, as if the Morlocks are inviting him in. The implication is chilling. They do not want to keep the machine hidden forever. They want to use it as bait. The time traveler steps into the open chamber and finds the time machine waiting. For a split second, it looks like relief. Then the trap closes. The Morlocks surge. They have engineered the moment, open the Sphinx, reveal the machine, lure the captive close, and seize him when he reaches for escape. This confrontation is physical and immediate. The time traveler fights through panic with a single intelligent move. He prioritizes function over rage. He gets to the machine, reattaches or secures its operating levers, and uses it in the only way that guarantees survival, by leaving. He does not simply flee to his own era. In shock and fear, he drives the machine forward again, as if distance in time might be safer than distance on foot. The world blurs. The Eloi Morlock nightmare snaps away. But Wells does not let the reader relax, because the point of the book is not that one future society is horrifying. The point is that time is larger than any one social arrangement. The time traveler stops far ahead, on the scale of millions of years. What he finds is not a twisted civilization, it is a dying planet. The Earth becomes alien in a deeper way than the Eloi's ruins. The sun looks wrong, redder, larger and colder in spirit, as if the world is running down. The landscape is desolate. The sea appears as a vast reddish expanse. Strange creatures move on the shore, crab-like forms adapted to a thinning, cooling world. Life persists, but it is sparse and eerie, more like the last twitch of biology than a flourishing ecosystem. The time traveler pushes even farther, as if chasing an answer to a question he cannot name. The motion of the planet itself seems to slow in his perception. The sky changes. The air feels lifeless. The world tends towards silence. This sequence is the story's cosmic verdict. Not only do societies degenerate, but the planet itself has an endpoint. Comfort, struggle, class, cruelty, all of it exists inside a finite system that will eventually go dark. Overwhelmed and terrified, the time traveller pulls back. He reverses course and returns to his own time. He arrives in his laboratory only a few hours after he originally left, which is one of Wells's key psychological tricks. The time traveller has effectively lived a nightmare across enormous spans of time. But the people in his present are still in the same evening, still expecting dinner conversation. He re-enters the dining room where the guests are waiting, still doubtful. He finishes his story. The guests are stunned, but skepticism remains. Wells keeps the narrative framed through the narrator's perspective for a reason. Belief is part of the theme. The time traveller does not bring back a futuristic gadget. He brings back something smaller and stranger. He produces 2 withered white flowers Weiner placed on him. They function as proof, but also as symbol. In a future where intelligence and discipline have rotted, gratitude and tenderness still flicker. The next day, the narrator returns to the time traveller's house and finds him preparing for another journey. The time traveller speaks as if he will be gone briefly, as if the machine can be used like a carriage, then he leaves again. The final note is unresolved in the bleakest way. The narrator waits, and time passes. The time traveller does not return. Analysis and themes. Theme 1. Class becomes biology. Claim. Wells argues that entrenched inequality can shape not just politics and culture, but the human body and mind over time. Evidence. The Eloi live above ground in ease, yet show incuriosity and weakness, while the Morlocks live below ground with machinery and predatory power. The Morlocks maintain the systems that keep the surface world comfortable, but ultimately feed on the Eloi. The time traveller reads this split as a long-term consequence of social division. So what? The book turns class into a slow violence that compounds across generations. It suggests that when a society normalizes exploitation, the exploited do not simply vanish. They adapt, organize, and eventually reverse the relationship. Theme 2. Comfort is not progress. Claim. The novel separates comfort from advancement, warning that ease can erode capability. Evidence. The Eloi inhabit the architectural leftovers of a once great civilization but do not maintain it. They fear darkness, avoid effort, and show little capacity for coordinated problem-solving. Their world looks like a utopia until the time traveller understands what it costs. So what? The story questions a modern reflex. Newer and easier must be better. Wells suggests that when systems remove struggle without building meaning, they can produce fragility rather than freedom. Theme 3. Technology exposes, it doesn't save. Claim. Wells treats technology as a flashlight, not a ladder. It reveals reality, but does not automatically improve it. Evidence. The time machine can move the time traveller across eras, but it cannot protect him from what he finds. Matches and fire help him survive, yet also create catastrophe. The tools he recovers do not restore the future, they only allow escape. So what? The book anticipates a modern pattern. Innovation outpaces wisdom. Powerful tools can widen perception while leaving moral and social systems unchanged, or worse, more efficient at harm. Theme 4. The future is not one thing. Claim. The novel insists that the future is not a destination but a chain of consequences that keeps unfolding. Evidence. The time traveller does not land in one stable endpoint. He sees one degraded social system, then pushes forward to a dying Earth, where society is irrelevant because biology itself is running out. The book refuses the fantasy that history culminates in a final, perfected state. So what? This disrupts utopian thinking and complacent cynicism at the same time. The future can be worse than expected, stranger than expected, and larger than expected. And the only way it changes is through present choices. Theme 5. Empathy is the rarest resource. Claim. Wells frames compassion as fragile, easily bred out, yet still meaningful when it survives. Evidence. The Eloy's indifference as Weiner drowns shows a chilling loss of mutual responsibility. The time traveler's rescue creates a small bond that stands out against the broader social decay. The white flowers at the end become the story's emotional evidence that tenderness can persist even when civilization fails. So what? The novel implies that empathy is not guaranteed by intelligence or comfort. It must be practiced, reinforced, and protected, or it atrophies into spectatorship. Character arcs. Protagonist. At the start, the time traveler believes rational invention can open reality and that knowledge is inherently empowering. By the end, the time traveler has seen that knowledge can terrify, that progress can degrade, and that survival often depends on crude tools and quick judgment rather than elegant theories. The key forcing moments are the disappearance of the machine, turning curiosity into urgency, the discovery of the Morlocks, turning beauty into dread, the loss of Weiner, turning empathy into grief, and the far future vision of a dying Earth, turning social critique into cosmic humility. A key secondary arc belongs to the narrator. The narrator begins as a fascinated skeptic, becomes unsettled by the time traveler's physical state and moral certainty, and ends holding a small physical token that pushes doubt into uncomfortable territory. Structure. Wells's most effective structural choice is the frame narrative. By filtering the time traveler's story through a dinner guest, Wells keeps belief unstable. The reader is invited to think like a Victorian rationalist, impressed, doubtful, hungry for proof, and uneasy when proof arrives in an emotional form rather than a mechanical one. The pacing also matters. The novel moves from social conversation to sudden bodily danger, then expands into vast timescale. That expansion is not decorative. It is thematic pressure. Wells starts with a small argument at a dinner table and ends with a planet running down, as if to say, your politics and comforts are real, but they sit inside a larger ending you cannot negotiate with. Symbolism is kept blunt and functional. The White Sphinx works as a lock, a riddle, and a taunt. Fire works as protection and destruction. The flowers work as evidence and elegy. Nothing is subtle in a precious way, but everything is placed to do double duty. What most summaries miss. Many summaries treat the Eloi and Morlocks as a simple, good surface people versus bad underground monsters setup. Wells is colder than that. The Eloi are not simply innocent victims. They are the end result of a class that outsourced labor and risk until it forgot how to live with reality. The Morlocks are not simply villains. They are the end result of being pushed into darkness and made into a machine class until their relationship to the surface becomes predatory. Another overlooked element is how the book weaponizes scale. The far future sequences are not an extra flourish. They are Wells refusing to let the reader treat social critique as a local problem with a local solution. Even if society reforms, the universe still runs down. That does not make reform meaningless. It makes meaning something humans must build without guarantees. Finally, Weiner is often reduced to the Eloi girl. Her function is sharper. She is a moral test. She is the one place the time traveler risks turning knowledge into responsibility rather than spectacle. Her absence is part of why the ending feels so bleak. Relevance today. The Time Machine still reads like modern commentary because it attacks patterns that have not disappeared. First, it maps cleanly onto automation and invisible labour. Many modern services feel frictionless because work has been pushed out of sight into warehouses, server farms, content moderation queues, outsourced support centres, and gig work. Wells's Surface Paradise runs on a hidden underworld. Second, it speaks to inequality as a long-term system, not a short-term scandal. When wealth concentrates, neighbourhoods segregate, education stratifies, and opportunity becomes inherited, the gap stops being economic and starts becoming developmental. Wells literalizes that drift by turning it into speciation. Third, it anticipates attention decay. The alloy's shallow focus and difficulty sustaining effort mirrors a culture where constant stimulation can erode patience for complexity, planning, and long-range thinking. Wells is not arguing screens make you stupid. He is arguing that comfort can make discipline feel unnecessary until discipline is urgently needed. Fourth, it aligns with politics as risk outsourcing. When societies treat certain groups as disposable buffers, workers, migrants, soldiers, the poor, those groups do not vanish from the system. They become the system's pressure point. The Morlocks are the revenge of hidden necessity. Fifth, it connects to climate and long-time horizons. The far future Earth sequences force a mental posture modern life resists, thinking in spans larger than elections, quarterly reports, and trending cycles. The novel insists that time is real, and consequences keep coming even when attention moves on. Sixth, it warns about utopian branding. A world can look solved on the surface while its foundations rot. That applies to institutions, companies, and even relationships. Appearances can be maintained right up until the hidden machinery fails. Seventh, it speaks to the moral cost of detachment. The Eloy watch Weiner drown. That moment lands today because spectator culture is easy. Tragedy becomes content unless a person chooses to intervene. Ending explained. The ending resolves the central adventure while refusing the comfort of closure. The time traveller escapes the Morlock's trap, returns to the present, and produces the white flowers as proof that his journey was not merely a story. The ending means the future is not a promise, but a consequence. Wells closes on absence. The time traveller leaves again and does not return. That choice reinforces the book's underlying argument. Time travel is not a party trick. It is exposure to a truth that the present cannot comfortably absorb. The flowers are both evidence and accusation. Even if tenderness survives in the far future, survival is not the same as flourishing, and proof is not the same as change. The ambiguity is also pointed. What is known is that the time traveller departs with supplies, intending another trip. What is uncertain is where he goes and whether he dies. What the ambiguity argues is that knowledge alone does not grant mastery. The time traveller can cross time, but he cannot make time safe. Why it endures. The time machine endures because it does not treat the future as a reward for invention. It treats the future as a mirror that shows what a society is building without admitting it. Readers who like idea-driven fiction, dark social speculation, and tight symbolic storytelling will find it rewarding. It is short, but it is not light. The book moves quickly while carrying a heavy thesis, and it does not soften its conclusions into inspirational uplift. Some readers may not enjoy it if they want rich character ensembles or a long emotional arc. The time traveller is more instrument than fully rounded psyche, and the future world is designed as a moral and political machine. Wells wants the concept to hit like a diagnosis. What it leaves you with is a clean, unsettling question. If comfort keeps rising while responsibility keeps shrinking, what kind of humans are we training ourselves to become? More insight, less noise. Subscribe and explore the full range at tailortailored.co.uk.